The traditional kind of Croydon Cat Killer scenario is a cat that disappears overnight, last seen sort of 9, 10 o'clock at night going out into the garden, and is found the next morning, minus head or tail, usually in the garden of where he spent the most time. So there's some families he's gone back and taken second or third cats from. Some places where he's gone back to the same houses, or he's gone around the corner, but he's gone back to like that small area on the same dates. My ex-partner and I ran a rescue in South Norwich, and we we saw on Facebook that there was a bet posted on Facebook to say, please keep your cats indoors at night because we've had 4 cats brought into us mutilated. I thought it was a bit of a not a hoax, but I just thought it was a bit both alarming, and also I didn't think that was going on. So I kind of said, well, we better have a look and have a chat to them. And he did. He rang the vets, and the vet said, no, we absolutely have had these animals brought into us, 4 of them, and they've all been mutilated. So we rang our vets, and our vet said, yes, we've had one as well. And because we were homing animals in the area, what we didn't want to be doing is continuing to place animals in homes in that area. And we went out and we put something on Facebook ourselves. We went down to the area and put leaflets out on a Saturday afternoon with some volunteers. And we came home with, I think it was 18 individual incidents. Some of it was kind of third hand, so we spent the next week or so trying to get hold of the owners or witnesses or vets, and we had 15 that we were able to verify. We took those to Croydon Police, and Croydon Police said, oh, we didn't know this was going on. And I said, well, it is, and they've all been reported to you because here's all the incident numbers. And they went, oh, and I said, well, what are you going to do about it? And they said, well, we can't really do anything about it because it's all happened. So I said, okay. I said, so what happens now? They said, okay, when you get another one, bring us the body. And I said, okay, what are you going to do with the body? Because you don't have a budget for animal crime. The RSPCA do that. And they went, oh. And we were tired underwhelmed. And we kind of went, well, so it's down to us then. And the police officer, very, very polite, nice police officer, just kind of went, yeah. So that's kind of how it started. So we then put an appeal out on Facebook for anybody else who'd had this happen to them to contact us. And we then got, in fairly quick succession, 3 or 4 more. Our vet had, because he had forensic experience, offered to basically do the post-mortems. And he came to the conclusion that it was a human being doing it. And then we got a call from a police officer in, I think it was Gypsy Hill, who had also had some. And he said, would you work with us? And I said, yeah, absolutely. But it wasn't, that was kind of the September, October 2015. I think it was January time, 2016, that the Met called us, DC Andy Collins, and he said, look, could you come in and chat to us? So we did. And to cut a very long story short, for the next 2 years, the RSPCA, us and police worked together on the investigation. Between October 2015 and January 2016, it was probably 15 or 20. But we still rely on vets to tell us whether they're killed by a human or not. As much as I've seen dead bodies, I wouldn't presume to make that decision. That's got to be down to a vet. I can say, yeah, it looks similar, but in terms of telling whether it's human-related or not, that's a vet that's got to be able to do that. The traditional kind of Croydon Cat Killer scenario is a cat that disappears overnight, last seen sort of 9, 10 o'clock at night going out into the garden, and is found the next morning, minus head or tail, usually in the garden of where he spent the most time. So if he spent most of his time in the neighbour's garden, it'd be the neighbour's garden. If not, it'd be the owner's garden. And that is kind of your typical scenario. We have had cats that have been missing for longer than overnight, so sometimes up to a week or 2. And the longest a cat had ever been missing was, I think it was 2.5 years. It was a cat in Caterham. But we don't know that he had that cat for 2.5 years, because if a cat goes missing, you don't know what's happened to it. Yeah. it's very difficult to be able to say, okay, yeah, that cat been missing because of him. It could have just been missing and vulnerable because it's missing, and therefore more inclined to, be tempted with food. There's some areas he has never ever killed cats in, and there's some areas he goes back to time and time again. He also goes back on some anniversary dates. So I think some of the killings must have special significance to him because he goes back. There's some families he's gone back and taken second or third cats from. And some places where he's gone back to the same houses, always gone around the corner, but he's gone back to that small area on the same dates. I'm sure that our main offender is male because serial killers in the main are, and serial killers who mutilate, apart from two exceptions, one in the States and one in the UK, both of whom were exceptions in their own right, are men. I'd say 99.99% sure that the Croydon Cat Killer is male. One of the difficulties was that there was quite a mix of injuries. The majority of the cats were being decapitated and having their tails removed, but the first official victim actually was slit down the middle, and his intestines were removed and placed next to him. So it was, and that was another reason why we weren't sure initially what we were dealing with, because equally, a cat can get run over and the force of the vehicle can cause really strange injuries that look like they could be deliberate, but actually aren't. They're accidental, which is why we pulled our vet in very, very early, because what we didn't want to be doing is making a big fuss about nothing. In most cases, the heads were not present at all. Heads and tails were missing. And in most cases, both the heads and tails were missing. But in some cases, it was just tails and just heads. In some cases, the body was missing and the heads were placed back, usually on the doorstep. Usually where the cat spent the most of its time was where the cat was placed back. There was one horrible case where a cat was missing for a week, belonged to a schoolgirl living in Alderscombe. She was 12 or 13, and she came home and found the cat's tail across her path in front of the front door, but just the tail, nothing else. Because freaky circumstances can only happen a couple of times. Freaky circumstances are freaky because they're not commonplace. But essentially, we went off the back of our vet's recommendations, and then the RSPCA brought in a vet who also believed they were human related. And we then, once the second lot of postmortems were done, we put a checklist together of things. I mean, there were two reasons for this. Number one, we were getting called out to every dead animal in the southeast, but so we had to have a way of sifting through that. So when we got a phone call, being able to go, okay, is this missing? Is that missing? Where was the body found? Blah 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 blah. Does it look wet, etc. etc. Because some of the bodies are actually washed and they're absolutely soaking, but it hasn't rained. And we think that's forensic related, but we kind of had this checklist that we took from all the information. It was about 9 months, a year in, so that we could work out what was likely to be related and what wasn't. And within that, we had signature injuries. When I say signature injuries, with particular things he does to the cats that we were noticing over and over and over, not every time. And it was a collection of them. It wasn't just the one thing. The actions were to get the RSPCA involved, and to keep basically being the main contact, because we had the Facebook page going on, and because we had there was a fair bit of press by that point. So they wanted us to stay kind of the main people who would take the calls. That changed over time. So what once the RSPCA were involved, the RSPCA said, "Oh no, the calls have got to come through to us." But then the helpline wasn't set up properly and wasn't briefed properly. So it was like we lost calls. So it ended up back in our court, and then it was basically call Snarl and call 101 as well, so that both the police and we were notified. I mean, there was quite a lot of the first 6 months. It was quite difficult because the RSPCA were going, well, it's got to be us in charge. And we were like, well, okay. And the police were going, well, it's got to be us in charge. And we were like, well, whatever, but please just get out to these bodies. And now that the police or the RSPCA had the manpower, in truth, I wouldn't criticize them by saying that they were useless. It's just that's not what they were set up for, and it's not what the police were set up for either. They couldn't spare police officers to go running off to a dead cat, and this is again is the issue, is that once there's a bit of publicity. The police got called about every single dead cat in the same way as we did. The police have this, I think, a mechanism where if they can't solve something, they bring other people in to do a review of the case. But again, we knew from the first meeting, we only had one meeting with that team ever, and they were completely disinterested. The DI was like, and there was I think a DC, and she was just like, yeah, whatever. There was no kind of intent, and we knew at that point that at some point we were going to lose the police because they were just. And whenever we had information through, it was like, yeah, right. We had no confidence from that point that they were actually doing anything with the information. It was almost like they'd made up their minds to close it, and then of course they did. Later on, we discovered that there were issues in terms of, so the forensic pathologist that said it was foxes, she was given bodies by Hertfordshire Police. We subsequently found out that she had no chain of evidence, so she didn't know where the bodies came from. For all we know, Hertfordshire Police did scrape up a whole lot of road traffic victims and send them to her. There was just, and then when the investigative journalist tried to do FOIs to the police, he said, well, that he was told there were no more records, that there were no records of the case at all that had been kept. So it's really shoddy police work, and because of incidents like Clive, we know that it can't be. It can't. That couldn't be foxes. In December, I think it was 2017. There was a lady who ran a rescue down in St Leonard's, who was aware of the case, and she had one of our posters outside of her house, and she ran a cat rescue, but she had a house rabbit called Clive, beautiful, beautiful, big lop-eared rabbit, and she had a lovely, absolutely gorgeous kind of Victorian-style garden, a stepped garden, and she went out for their the rescue Christmas dinner, and I think about 4:00. And then came in about 8:00, and Clive wasn't around. And Clive had free reign of the garden with the cats and the kittens. But it was really odd because he was really kind of bonded to her, and to have him not around, she was like, hang on, where is he? So she did a big search of the garden, couldn't find him, was out looking till 2, 3 in the morning, couldn't find any sign of him at all. Went to sleep, woke up at 8 the next morning, walked out of her back door, and Clive was kind of laid out on the first bit of her garden, which was a lawn, minus head, tail, front paws. Horrible, absolutely horrible. So she called police. One of her colleagues called us. Police called us to say we've had one down here, because Sussex Police already knew about them. They were excellent. There was a team at Sussex Police who were brilliant. And they went down, and then we went down in the evening. We had to look at the garden, and there was just things looked disturbed. So I rang the police officer, David, who we had his number, and he said, look, David, could you get a forensic team down here the next day? Because there's bits in the garden that just don't make sense. They don't look like wind. But they'd basically found, either the police or she had found the rabbit's liver on a stone, raised stone, which was next to a shed, one of the sheds at the bottom of the garden. So we didn't want to leave that. So her colleague and I lifted up this big ceramic plant pot, and it was massive. It took 2 of us to lift and stick it over this raised stone to preserve the evidence. We went back to London. I deeply regret that decision, because the owner was so upset that I felt that we were probably better off if one of us stayed with her. But we had cats to feed and this and that and the other. But I do regret that decision, because he appears to have come back. So the next morning she got up, her rabbit flap was like a dog flap, had been kicked open. It was damaged beyond repair. All of her cats were outside. She didn't know where half of them were. So you can imagine the panic. She called police. Police arrived, and when they lifted up the ceramic plant pot, Clive's liver wasn't there, but his collar was. Now, there's absolutely no way that's going to be foxes. I'm sorry. And I was there. I helped put that plant pot on top of that raised stone. There's absolutely zero way a fox could have gone under there, had the collar in its mouth, deposited it, took the liver and buggered off again. Absolutely no way. So Clive's body had exactly the same injuries. The limbs and the head and the tail were taken off in exactly the same place as the cat's. Absolutely, some rabbits will get eaten by foxes, especially if their owners don't have appropriate caging for them. Absolutely, categorically. But a number of cases, they've had locks on, so they've had actual locks on the hutches. And I'm sorry, foxes don't run around with spare keys. So I've been doing animal rescue for years and years, and I got to the point where I couldn't sort of rehome as the need grew. I couldn't rehome as easily because I'd rehome to family, friends, etc. And we knew that we had to kind of have a formal rescue. So we did. We set up on Facebook a year before all this kicked off. So we were quite clear. We remained the point of contact for people. So people would ring us if their cat was injured or hurt or killed. The RSPCA also took a number of those calls. The police did the investigation. We did some investigation in terms of the scene, taking witness statements and bits and pieces, and finding out when the cat was last seen and when all of that sort of stuff. But the actual nitty-gritty investigation was allegedly being done with the police, and we'd pass information on, and it would just be like. But we found out exactly how little had gone on, which is why we formed Slane to go through all of that again and go through all the suspects again. Because I think at one point, if a suspect was called into the police, if he didn't have a criminal record, it was binned. Although the police didn't want us patrolling, a patrol team was set up in Caterham, and they were really, really good. They went out every night. They were cruising about. And there was one night where they'd seen a guy kind of ducking in amongst cars and stuff. Because they're all vehicle-based, they didn't get out their car. But they kind of followed him, and he just disappeared down an alleyway, and they'd just gone. And they all worked and stuff. So sort of by 1-2 o'clock in the morning, they were all asleep. Well, the cat was killed that night in that road. The lights went out in Caterham at midnight. It might have been 11 o'clock, actually. But so he was pitch black dark, and they couldn't really see what he looked like. But they kind of got an idea. So we said, okay, got it into the police, etc., etc. And then a couple of residents saw a bloke of the same description. One of them, he was making like noises and trying to get a cat's attention. Another one, he was doing something else odd. And he was literally, kind of weaving down the road, ducking and diving. So that was called into the police. And then I think 2 or 3 nights later, he was spotted again. And this time somebody actually chased him. I think with a garden fork, but they chased him down the road. Unfortunately, the police got there just too late. They came out with dogs just too late, and he again went down an alleyway and just disappeared. So from all those descriptions, there was kind of a generic description. And then I was, what was I doing? I was at the Warren on the Saturday, because they wanted me to do a briefing for local Bromley police about the case. But just before then, we were called to it wasn't decapitated. It was a cat that was mutilated in Orpington, and it was an odd case because the paws had been wrapped with something, and it was slightly different to what we'd been seeing, but not outside of the range. We had to wait for the police and forensics, etc. And my phone rang, and a woman said, "Oh, it sounds a bit weird, but it was about 4 o'clock the previous afternoon. She'd found this guy trying to coax her cats. And she said, what the hell are you doing? And he's like, oh, no, I've lost my cat. And she said, what did the cat look like? And the woman said, the guy said, it was a silver tabby with white paws, male cat. And she said, well, there's no silver tabby with white paws here. Are you local? And he said, yeah, I live in number 15. And she knew who lived in number 15, so she knew he was lying. Anyway, she just said, look, can you please stop feeding my cats and go away? And he did. But she thought about it, and the more she thought about it, the more she thought there's something really odd about him. And she actually got her husband to jump in the car with her, and they did a kind of a search to see if he was still around. And he wasn't, but it bugged her. So the next day she got online and had a look and discovered what was going on, and rang us. And it was quite chilling because the cat that we'd just been to was a silver tabby male with white paws. So that description was taken quite seriously, and it matched the Caterham description. It was quite a generic description, and there's quite a few suspects that fall into that category. At one time, we had 60-odd suspects. People would ring up and say, look, I think so-and-so's the Croydon Cat Killer. 90% of those cases were ex-partners trying to get their exes into trouble. We've got a short list of 15, of which we've got a top 3 suspect list, and all 3 have an alleged history of hurting animals and women. And it was one of the reasons why I was quite cross about the police discarding anybody who didn't have a criminal conviction, because a lot of domestic abuse goes unreported, and usually if there's domestic abuse, there's abuse of the animals as well. Towards the end of Takahe, there was a string of incidents in Northampton, and they were the same as ours in terms of there were decapitations and tail removals, but the first ones were not. The first ones were the cats cut up into tiny pieces and placed in carrier bags, like supermarket shopping bags, back on their owner's doorsteps. So that particular guy was a guy called Brendan Geoghegan. He got convicted of arson and also the attacks on the cats, criminal damage, but the judge only gave him 4.5 years. Animal cruelty is a crime. The way that our laws are written, you'll effectively get a conviction if it's the owner who does it. If somebody else does it, you kind of have to go into quite a protracted process around proving it was cruel, that the animal suffered. So if you just kill a cat, it's not, horrible as it sounds, it's not illegal. For cats that aren't owned, you can't do a criminal damage charge. And some of the arsons were absolutely appalling. They were proper arsons to endanger life. And he's disappeared afterwards. We suspect he's gone back to Ireland. We know we can't be responsible for some of the others because he wasn't in the country for the length of time that the investigation was going on. So I think he only came into the UK in 2017, and the killings had been going on for 2 years before. So there was him. Thankfully, Northampton police didn't decide to blame it on foxes, because otherwise I'm sure he would have ended up killing someone. He took out a number of garden fences, but he also took out a home, a restaurant that was on a boat. Yeah, really quite serious, nasty crimes. And he admitted in court that what he wanted to do actually was break and enter into a woman's home and rape her. March 2019, after the police closed the case, we had a call from lost and found people in Norwich saying, look, we think we've got, and it was lovely. There's a group of ladies who run that group, and they're fantastic, and they go out to any kind of lost cats or found cats or dead cats. One of the ladies contacted me and said, look, I've got the back legs and tail of a cat that's been found on an allotment. She said, what do I do? She said, we've never had one of these before. You would think if foxes were doing it, they would have had plenty before, but never mind. So I said, well, look, best thing to do is take it to vet. And she sent me some photos, and I went, I said, I think probably there is a fox's, the cat's been buried and the foxes dug it up. Anyway, she took it to vet, and James the vet went, oh, he said, no. He said, no, this is once he cleaned it up, he said, this is way too clean. This is not an animal that's done it. So she came back with that, and I have to admit, I always kind of err on the other side. I'd rather tell owners and people that it's an RTA than someone's done it. And I couldn't honestly tell from the photos because the body was dirty. And then we had another one, and then another one, and then one night a guy was seen trying to stuff cats into canvas bags, and it properly kicked off in Norwich, and that was David Ewu, who went on to kill Martin Decker 2 years later. And in court, he actually said that he wanted to kill as many gay men as possible. So he was just going to kill people until he was caught. And he was only caught because there was a really good police officer in Norwich. So they thought it was David Ewu. They arrested him, but he had nothing on his phone. So he had no photos of the cats, anything. He must have had 2 phones. Anyway, so they had to let him go, but I think they took his DNA and stuck it in the system. So when the DNA flagged up north at a murder scene, they knew who it was, and they went to go and found him. If it hadn't been for the police officer doing that, he probably would have killed several people because they wouldn't know at a starting point as to who he was. And he was then, when they arrested him for Martin Decker's murder, he actually had a phone with all the pictures of the cats he'd mutilated on it. They did put him on trial for the cats, but he used the trial like as a sounding board to try and get at the owners and say, if you want, want to know what I've done with your cat's ears, come and talk to me. I really enjoyed killing your cat. It was all that kind of stuff. And there was no point taking them through a trial, so they just shut it down, which was really difficult for the owners because they never kind of had their day in court and their justice, but better that than them being re-traumatized by his behavior. Both of them were neighborhood groups. Both of them enjoyed the panic and the fear and also the anger and the distress of the owners. And it's one of the reasons when we set the Slane page up that we were not going to be the police's mouthpiece or anybody's mouthpiece. We weren't going to actually post about incidents unless we needed help with something. We're not going to do that at all. Because I think to a certain extent, the police asking us to keep posting about it meant that whoever's doing it was getting a kick out of it. Now, I'm not going to get the date right on this, but it was 2018, I think. We started getting, we had kind of Croydon Cat Killer cases down in Brighton, and in fact, all of the Sussex coast, in most of the towns. So a lot of the animal rescue groups knew us. I got a call from a vet to say, we've had a cat brought in, I'm pretty sure they've been stabbed. And I was like, you sure it isn't a road traffic accident? And they went, no, these are knife cuts and they're deep. And the cat actually didn't survive. And I was like, well, that's not something we're investigating. And I said to them, look, please call our SPCA. I said, because if we get involved, we can't take on everything, and it probably is just a one-off. If it isn't a road traffic accident, then it's probably a one-off, but it needs to be reported, so go through the official channels. Well, I was bloody wrong, wasn't I? Was I wrong? Anyway, about a week later, we had another one. Vet called us, said, look, we've got a cat in here and I'm sure it's been stabbed. I was like, oh, I've got déjà vu. So what we did is I actually didn't want to be involved in this because I was worried that people would conflate our case with what was going on. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. When Boudicca was put away, people thought that the Croydon Cat Killer had been put away and started letting their cats out again. One of our team, Julie, kept a log of all the cases, all the potential cases, and was in contact with the owners. I was in contact with some of the owners, and between us, we kind of managed it, although we weren't officially investigating. I spoke to Sussex Police and they were going, oh, it's road traffic accidents. And I was like, no, it's not. And eventually what we did is we made such a noise about it that the police had to start investigating it. One of the owners put up CCTV after their cat was injured, and he actually caught Stephen Boudicca stabbing a cat on that CCTV, and that's how they caught him. It was down to the owners and the lost and found cats in Brighton that Boudicca was caught, not Sussex Police. I suspect he probably injured and killed around 30, 40 cats, but I think he was only charged with 15. We've come close. We've come really, really close. Rob was patrolling, it's a couple of years ago now, but he was patrolling in one road, and the killer literally killed around the corner. And we've had a couple of other instances where we had patrol teams get very close. We're also aware that he is aware of what we're doing. And actually this last week, we now have a blackout on Twitter. We're not tweeting. So what we do is we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 patrols. One of our patrol teams is a joint patrol team, so 6 or 7, depending on how you kind of split them out. But they go out, some of our patrollers go out once a week. Some of them only come out if we're doing something special. A number of them go out regularly. So we've got a patrol presence across South London, I'd say most nights. When we went back and pulled all the data out, I started categorising them. So if a vet had seen them, if they've been post-mortemed, and absolutely categorically human, confirmed. Yeah. If they had been to a vet and a vet had said, "Oh, I don't like the look of this. It's not a road traffic accident. It's human," and we had been along to have a look and gone, "Yeah, that's the same injuries." Because sometimes it could be human, doesn't mean it's our guy. So go, yeah, a couple of signatures there. Yep, that's confirmed. If a vet says that they think it's human related and there's a match in terms of the description, then we put it under highly suspicious. If we don't see the body, but it's the same description, again, suspicious. And then if there's less information, it goes down as a possible. So of the, when I say there's about 2,500 incidents reported to us, and about 800, 900 are within the confirmed highly suspicious category. I've kind of grown a very thick skin over the last 9 years, and it's why I don't really get into arguments online about if people go to say, "Oh, it's foxes." There was a really silly piece I read on the internet. It was about 3 months ago, about trying to say that I had psychological problems and I was getting a kick out of the owner's distress, and I was just like, "All right, mate, if that's your opinion, you know, there's people are going to think." Either that they're either going to believe something's going on because it's happened to them, or someone they care about, or they're not. And I said earlier, it's not my job to convince people. It's our job to catch them. If people want to be wrong on the internet, that's not my problem. If they want to be wrong about me, also not my problem. I don't feel the need to be publicly right. What I want to do is stop this, and that's my motivation. I think it comes down to, at the end, it comes down to this: that foxes don't have hammers and nails. They don't have freezers. They can't return bodies 6 months or body parts 6 months later undecomposed. They can't kick dog flaps open. You know, they don't. You might get a fox trying to get into a house via a cat flap, but they wouldn't leave bloody footprints on the cat flap. There's an instance we have where garden furniture has been moved around, and it's been obviously moved against a fence, so someone's got over that. Foxes don't do that. There's just a kind of a whole range of things that aren't fox related. We do have some volunteers who help us, so if someone is unable to get a cat to the vet, still call us and we'll try and get you help. But it's not essentially what we do. What we do is looking at the data, looking at what happened around the incident. So was anybody noticed, did the owner notice anyone strange? Did they get any phone calls? Did they get this? Because there's been a couple of those as well. There's been some interactions over the years that we think have been him interacting with victim owners. I do think that this person isn't just hurting cats, yeah. And I whether he'll spill over into the true kind of traditional serial killer that goes along killing people, I don't know. We don't know whether I've got a theory. My theory, for the record, is that he's using the animals as a control mechanism so he doesn't kill people, but he may already be killing people.